Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Shall we start?
Please do.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Our dear guests, students, and all attendees, hi and welcome. My name is Omar Ahmed, and I'm the Vice President of ISCEA Egyptian Student Chapter, and I'll be your host and moderator today. I'm very pleased to be hosting the first international online virtual seminar under the umbrella of our association, as well as the Arab Academy for Science, Technology, and Maritime Transport. From this standpoint, I would love to thank His Excellency, the President of the Arab Academy, Professor Ismail Abdel Ghaffar, for all his efforts and his continuous visions of internationalizing our academic life. And this association is part and was part of his vision. We'd love to thank our dean and our supporter, Dr. Islam al-Naqib, also for all his efforts and support. Just to give a brief about our association, ISCEA stands for the International Supply Chain Education Alliance, which is the first association to globally certify supply chain professionals, as well as its continuous improvement in the field, considering students also in colleges and universities. And we see that in the student chapters around the world. So each country has its own chapter, and we are pleased to be the Egyptian chapter. And we'd love to say that all these chapters globally work in unison to achieve the goal of our association. And we are very pleased today to be talking with Mr. Frank Vorrath. And it's our pleasure to have him in our first session. Just highlight Mr. Frank Vorrath is one of the most important professionals in our field. Mr. Frank Vorrath is highly experienced and qualified and is one of the most important executives. He has worked in Germany, South Africa, Brazil, the United States. Mr. Frank was with Gardner Supply Chain as an executive of supply chain, and he was also a partner. In 2016, Mr. Frank was rated by the Supply Chain Movement magazine under the top 38 supply chain professionals in Germany. Mr. Frank also, importantly, contributed in the white paper from Lisa Harrington, Solving Talent Crisis, 5 Alternatives Every Executive Must Consider. And also Mr. Frank contributed to the book from the Professor Bram Desmond, Supply Chain Strategy and Financial Metrics. So he's a very well-rounded, established professional, and we are very, very happy to be hosting our first ever seminar with such an established individual. Mr. Frank, the floor is yours.
Yeah, and thanks for inviting me and having me today. And also, it's a pleasure from my side really to talk to young upcoming supply chain professionals and really people who are interested in the field and really making supply chain better and also making sure that we have a succession plan in place. So I'm very, very, very pleased about it. So I thought what I'm going to do today is a little bit talking about the topic of building resilient and strategy supply.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but your voice is a bit low. So can you speak a little louder, possibly?
And I will adjust also the computer. Hopefully it will work. So I will do it from both angles. Hopefully my computer here, the setup works, and also my voice. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how to build more sustainable supply chains and also making them more strategic in volatile markets. So I prepared a presentation, and I thought that we're going to go through this a little bit, and then we have also an opportunity for you to, with me, to have a dialogue a little bit in terms of, what I'm seeing, or, what are we experiencing, and also what to prepare for, or what to watch out for. And perhaps while I'm doing this, I'm now sharing my screen. And it's hopefully loading here. And perhaps you can tell me when it's, on your side, you can see it.
We can see your screen, yes.
Okay, so very, very much appreciate it. Thanks for that feedback. So I'm going to start a little bit on, I would say, more the high level, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview why a supply chain is so important. And I'm going from there also saying, what have we experienced, and how to look at supply chains, and what to watch out for, and also how to structure supply chains in the future. So I'm going to start really a little bit about why supply chain is so important. Right? I'm also referring a little bit to a recent survey conducted by Gartner. Gartner, as you may or may not know, is a world-leading research and advisory company. So they're consistently looking at the markets, customers, companies, and also some by using the information and turning that into research and providing that research again to their customers. But when they looked into why supply chain is so important, they really looked into the impact supply chain is having. And I believe that it goes without of saying that we all have experienced over the last couple of years, volatile world, which got highly disrupted, and also where supply chains have been in the focus of many executives in many organizations, right? And if you look at that, of really the impact supply chain is having in terms of the performance, and also in terms of customer loyalties, which means in the end of the day, how loyal we are in terms of making a decision to do business with companies, or to buy their products or services, etc. And I wanted to point out on that slide on the left side. And that's really, when you look into the decline in supply chain performance, has a bigger impact on customer loyalty than, for example, if you increase your prices. So that's one of very important things to keep in mind, because in the end of the day, that means supply chain has a significant impact on companies' future as well as their success, right? And when you think about what really it comes down to, it's really three factors on satisfaction. And it's reliability. So in a way, what do you promise to the market? What is your value proposition as a company, and what are you able to deliver through your supply chain, through your physical supply chain? What capabilities do you have as an organization? And capabilities is really in a way of starting with people competencies, the processes, how you actually handle your processes end to end, but also how you actually deploy technology. How do you deal with data? How do you deal with the way how you manage your performance in supply chains from a performance management and management and then also how adaptable are you? And adaptability is something I'm going to talk a little bit later on that, because that's some of the things we have to focus far more in future in terms of adaptability to an ever-changing environment. Because we're moved as well also from a world of just in time into a world of more just in case. But then I wanted to point out something else here of really, it's another survey conducted by Gartner. Also, they looked into, what is creating a competitive advantage through supply chains in future for companies. And when you look at that, it's really, when we look at supply chain management, we have to keep in mind that in the end of the day, we serve customers or end consumers. But the way how you can look at that is also, you know, are you satisfying your customers? Are you putting them at ease, or are you even enabling them to do their jobs better, right? So in the end of the day, what was also conducted and found out is really that if a company is being able to really enable their customers to do their jobs better, it creates a competitive advantage. So the bottom line is here, it's really important when you look at supply chains that you really keep the customers in mind, also the markets you want to serve, and how do you actually create a competitive advantage. And that comes through your end-to-end supply chain setup. And I know companies often being organized functionally, but in the end of the day, when you think about supply chain as an entity, supply chain as an entity flows horizontally. And often organizations being organized vertically. And that sometimes also creates conflicts, right? And now we have to think about how do we create that more sustainably, and how do we also create a competitive advantage. And that's something I'm going to talk about now. But as you are all students and looking into supply chains and logistics and all that, that's always also good to refer a little bit to the SCORE model, which you probably know by now because you are students. So the supply chain operations reference model is really looking upstream and downstream in a supply chain, from plant, source, make, deliver, and return. But also when you think about that, it's the supply chain, which I call often the super glue of everything, who keeps everything together. And excellence is really when you do certain things consistently, also from a point of view of being operationally excellent, but also in the end of the day, see a supply chain as a means to an end. So when you think strategically also from an executive, how an executive would look into supply chain is a means to an end, meaning creating and achieving sustainable business performance and results. So it's really the sustainable part of it's not a fly by night. You achieve that also over a longer period of time. You prove yourself, and it's consistently improving. And you do that through improving your people competencies, processes, technologies, and performance management capabilities. So it's really how you also measure what's essential in your business, and how do you use what you measure, which means the data and information you receive, which puts you in a position to make better decisions, right? And then also these and use these capabilities to support, to drive a positive end-to-end customer experience. So it's really about that. So what's supply chain management? I could ask you, but let me give you a little bit my way of looking into that, and then later on we can test you if you don't mind. No, I'm just kidding, but I want to start with a supply chain triangle. So in my introduction, there was also a reference to Professor Dr. Bram de Smeets, who is a professor, but also a book author, and he's the CEO of a company called Solventure, and he wrote a book called The Straightforward Supply Chain. Now I had an opportunity to contribute a little bit in there, and the way how we started also looking into supply chain is from really the supply chain triangle of really service, cost, and cash. When you think about that, really strategically also, it is about the balance in it. So in a way, making deliberate choices in terms of how you want to serve your customers, also what kind of value enablers you bring to the table, how you want to compete on them, and also what correspondence it has in the configuration in your supply chains. What cost you're gonna have, and also in a way how you actually employ or deploy your capital side. And how do you bring this all in balance? And often it is a conflict being created in organization when you think about the balance of the triangle. And some of the conflicts being created is actually also when you look at the consequences of doing certain things. And I'll give you a couple of examples of, and hopefully they are easy to understand. So if you source in certain areas and you have a long tail supply chains, of course, perhaps your costs are going down. Hopefully, right? Maybe we have also seen in the last few years it's not really happened because a lot of logistics and transportation costs have been going through the roof and they increased. So maybe the setup in the old days doesn't work in the new world anymore. That's another learning for the last 2 years. But you would also see if you're dealing with long tail supply chains, maybe that has an impact on service and service reliability. But perhaps you have an advantage in cash. So in the end of the day, it becomes a trade-off decision. But also when you think about lowering your inventory by lowering the safety stock, you will see that you have a positive impact on your cash. You may have a negative impact on your cost, and perhaps if you are not having enough stock available to serve your markets, it could impact on your service. So the bottom line is really when you think very pragmatically about balance in the supply chain, it is about service, cash, and making trade-off decisions also in a way of really being aware about it and making deliberate choices. But why is it so difficult actually to make this kind of decision? It is about also the lack of balance in the triangle, and also in a way of let me show you this picture here. It is about that we looking at supply chains more from a functional point of view as instead of really being fully integrated. So when you think about the different functions of the supply chains, it's really when you think how organizations are being sometimes organized from a procurement point of view or purchasing point of view. What do they worry about? It's about cost. So they would sit on the right side of the corner of the triangle. Production is also about cost. It's about productivity. It's about the lowest cost per unit, efficiency goals, and all that. So if you have a supply chain function, and supply chain is not really fully integrated in an organization, so what do they worry about? It's sometimes also cost. It's about the cash side. Especially in an environment where we live in now, where the cash becomes more and more in focus. And this is then also being structured around the cost and the cash sides. And when you think about sales is often being, really focusing on service, turnover, market share, and all. So what you see at that picture here is that you would have often conflicting goals in the supply chain triangle, leading to tensions. So in the end of the day, it is again a balancing act. How do you balance your service, cost, and cash decisions? Now, what have we experienced over the last 2 years? We have been all part of it. The world has changed. It's very, very difficult. So first of all, I'm going to show you a picture of what most supply chains looked at. So that's pretty much, I believe, the picture we have. And hopefully we'll be getting this traffic jam, which could be anywhere in the world. I don't know exactly where it is, but we get that resolved. But we have a chance and opportunity now. But also what has happened is that picture. So we had to deal with as many disruptions as you can see here on that slide. But also what the point is, in the last probably 5 years or so, We needed to deal with disruptions, which we never had to deal with. And the question is that really going to go away? Which means we have, you know, natural catastrophes. We have geopolitical issues. We had, you know, a pandemic to deal with. Now we have also a war situation to deal with. We have high inflation. We had you know, certain other things, cyber attacks, trade wars, things like that are becoming more and more in focus. So, and it becomes very, very difficult to manage supply chains if you don't really think about that and you really evaluate how you think about that, and you take that more from a tactical response to a strategic process. Which means we have to start also to anticipate more, and that's really, when you think about what's happened in the last 24 months. And there's also, and I want to refer that back to the cash cycle. So when you think about what happened on the supply chain triangle, is we had to deal with the lack of raw material inventory. A lot of key suppliers have been unable to supply the needed raw material or components. The service really had a big issue, which means we couldn't supply, we couldn't commit. Often companies went into allocation processes, which means, you know, you have to make different plans because you don't have really a lot of material available. You have to adjust your production. It becomes a chaos to manage. So that's the reality of things, what happened in a lot of organizations. Which means you have firefighting costs to close the service gap, which means also often expediting, and it becomes then showing at the cost side of the triangle again, because it's increasing the cost. Now also, we had then the typical bullwhip effect, which you probably have learned already about, where you have, you know, a certain demand and supply cannot keep up with that, and the multiple tiers in the supply chains, it building, you know, a bullwhip, because the reaction time is different, and not every party in the supply chain can react in the same manner. Which means we also have built, you know, demand by large exceeds capacity. But we moved into an environment of lack of capacity, which means a lot of allocations. We have increased lead times, especially when you think about transportation lead times, which are on average increased by 7 to 10 days, which means also you had a lot of issues, or lots of companies had issues with that, and found themselves also in a situation where they overstocked. And now in the current environment, where cash becomes more in focus again, a lot of companies try to reduce lead times, but also trying to reduce trade working capital, which is then again on the cash side. So that's really what's happened in the last 24 months. So let me also show you that picture. So that's how most supply chain professionals looked at that in the last two years, and the picture probably hasn't really changed, because now the focus is really on cash. A lot of really supply chain professionals these days are now have to remove the buffer or the buffers in supply chains which exist. Also looking into really what can we do to stabilize, almost like cleaning out the house again, and really making sure that we set up these supply chains which have been set up very, you know, to operate very efficient into more resilient supply chains. And agility becomes more and more in focus. So let me give you a little bit of an outlook what that could mean. So first of all, Well, I said before that disruptions are not going to go away. That's something also when you think about supply chains and set them up for the future, they have to consider the, as I would call it, the total value at risk, which means you have to have an end-to-end view on these things and making risk management more strategic and not only tactical, and looking end-to-end in a way of saying how effective can I anticipate potential disruptions in any kind of my supply chain networks, because you're not only operating one supply chain network, and what is my total reaction time and response in case I'm going to be disrupted. And some of these disruptions you have to anticipate. I'll give you one which is out there now, cyber attacks. We had our own experience last year where we got here one of our business attacked, and it took us quite a while to recover. So cyber security risk is real, right? But it's only one disruption. So it could be another one as well, potentially geopolitically, where you have to react. Or, for example, trade tariffs could be increased and you have to react. In a way, you have to be able to set up your supply chains then differently in future and look into what does that mean in terms of agility, and what are the learnings to make supply chains a little bit more resilient, also more strategy driven and in volatile markets, because markets will be always volatile. There will be disruptions, and your adaptability, and that was the beginning of my presentation, and your ability to respond to that will create an advantage or a disadvantage for you as an organization. So we have to look at that from that point. So let me also talk a little bit about what we saw. Again, in 2019 and before we got COVID, a lot of supply chains have been designed for efficiency purposes, lean, just in time purposes. And that was for a good reason, because we have been had a more stabilized world where we also could actually do these kind of things. But there wasn't enough room for disruptions or for the way of resilience of supply chains to be agile enough in case there are disruptions to respond, because the supply chain has the task to respond, which means you have a market, you have a demand, you have customers you want to serve, and you have to configure your supply chain in a way to respond. Now, when you think about you designing something for efficiencies, but you got disrupted, then you have to actually have enough agility in your network to respond. If you don't have enough agility in your network, then you're not being able to respond. And you either not being able to serve your customers, or it will cost you a lot of money and it goes against your profitability. So in a way, you need to think about making supply chains also more adaptive, and adaptability becomes key. So it starts with the strategy design part of when you think about supply chains, how do you set them up? And really, when you think about outside in, where you start with markets, customers in the market, and you define your value propositions through a market analysis, and where you make a deliberate choice as an organization. How do you want to compete in that market with that supply chain network, particularly around certain customers, right? And then you need to define your value proposition, but you also have to understand your complexity, your variability. That comes often through your products, your portfolio, your innovation drive, or also your volume, your mix, your variability. And then you have to set your response in order to compete based on your value proposition. And that could be different also by supply chains or supply chain networks. And that's really when you make your supply chains also strategy driven. Now, what I said in the past, most supply chains also have been designed as one size fits all. That doesn't really exist. And I'm going to talk about that in a second or so. So primarily for cost efficiency, but if we want to make them resilient more, maybe it costs us also a little bit more. So we have to think again about the trade-off decisions in the supply chain, which means resiliency comes at a cost, and agility is an input for that. If I want to design more agile supply chain, I maybe have to make trade-off decisions around cost, but also potentially around my cash. And I give you an example. If I have long-tail supply chains and I actually want to build them resilient or agile, I may have to increase my inventories, and that means I hold more cash and tie my capital within of my inventory, but it is a hedge against the risk I would have in case I would get disrupted, and there is then an impact on the cash side. But I potentially have it on the cost side as well. So it is a deliberate trade-off which you have to make. So building resilient strategies has to be looked at the entire supply chain network. And that's really what you see here in terms of your product portfolio, your ecosystem, which means you're part of an big ecosystem. So if your trading partners, your suppliers, or suppliers of your suppliers, your logistics service providers, your customers. So you have to build that ecosystem. You have to think of your products, you have to think about your distribution, about your manufacturing network, sourcing network, but also about your inventory and your capacity management. So something probably you have learned already in there. But when you think about also what is supply chain resiliency, so that if you ask different people, you get different definitions. So I give you one of Gardner, where really Gardner is looking at that and is saying it's the ability of an organization to avoid, absorb, and recover from the business impact of major disruptions through a risk-balanced approach to product supply chain strategy and network design. So again, it is important when you think about resiliency that you have that approach from really product, market, supply chain strategy, and network design. And really having a strategic view on that, and start with strategy first and then design your supply chain in order to respond to that. So it's very important also when you think about making supply chains more strategic and more sustainable. But how do you do that in an organization? You have to think about two actions. One, perform while you transform. And you have to do that local and global in a consistent manner and in a balanced approach. And you have to also deploy speed. Speed can be a very competitive advantage for organizations, because in the end of the day, if you can do things as an organization in half time, then maybe others can do it, can create also competitive advantage. And often what you see also in organizations when they deploy speed, they have designed the organizational structure to deploy speed, but also making trade-off decisions about speed over perfection. For example, you can design something for a very long period of time, or you make a trade-off of also accepting that you fail with certain things, but then creating a structure around it that you can recover from that very, very fast, and you learn from it. So it's also something when you think about how organizations are being designed these days, perform and transform capabilities. You have to do it in the same way. You cannot just perform, which is keeping the lights on, or just the daily operations, without taking transformational actions at the same time. And often organizations being designed also having then different types of people in the organization. The one side of people who can then focus on the day-to-day operations, and on the other side also often through a center of excellence or center of innovations, which can transform that organization, because you have to do that on process. And that really looks and then into your current capabilities, into your future capabilities. So you have to keep an eye on that also, what you need to do in order to really make everything more sustainable from a point of view of your capabilities in order to compete in future. Because again, the world is changing, and we have to build different types of capabilities with our people competencies, with the technology and the digitalization and so on, in order to compete in future on a different level. So it's almost like you have to run sprints and marathons at the same time. And then when you do this, effectively, it becomes part of your operating model, and your operating model choices, they then really build these more resilient supply chains into your overall model. All right, so that's really from a strategy point of view how you would do that. And that's another slide which I just wanted to show you and also give you a view, which is pretty much also from John Gattorna. You probably know Professor John Gattorna. Also, who wrote a book on transforming supply chains, but it's pretty much also something where we see the future of supply chains being more tailored, which means we could also look at supply chains as tailored value streams, and you would look at them differently. You would set them up differently. So almost every value stream becomes a different configuration, because you would now start also making the value stream strategic or strategy driven in a way of really doing the mapping, what I said before, really starting with customers, markets, and then configure your value stream. And then aligning a lot of these models, which you see here on that slide. So what am I seeing? That's something actually also coming from where we are focusing on. I think we're moving into a more like tailored and trusted supply chain. So it's all about trust and also how our customers or consumers trust in supply chains. So it's not only tailored, it's also trusted. So if companies are focusing on really building these two elements into that tailored, which means tailored to needs of customers in specific markets and specific geographies, and configure your supply chain, making trade-offs in the supply chain triangle, being trusted, work on reduction of complexity and also simplicity in a way, making them more resilient but also responsive. That is the element what I've spoken about, being able to adapt, right? Making them more connected and intelligent, which means also using data to be able to make better decisions, but making also sure that you're becoming more intelligent and connected. And the connectivity is across your whole economic ecosystem. So it isn't just inside your own four walls, it is also being connected with the outside and really with the entire economic ecosystem. And then also what I said before is really about being faster, using clock speed. The clock speed is really a principle of where you connect yourself with the outside market. And the outside market has a speed or a pace and a clock speed. And if you're not aligned with the outside market from a clock speed point of view, and the market is fast and then you can respond, then you have a problem as an organization. So you have to keep, as an organization, also an eye on that. And your supply chains, in the end of the day, they don't just have to be efficient, in the end of the day, supply chains, they have to be effective, whatever you have chosen in your value proposition and how you want to compete. So that's really when supply chains are becoming effective. And also when you think about supply chains, not only as a function, really you have to start to think from supply chain into MSM. So I believe that's really what I had for you today. And not sure if there are any questions, any comments. Back to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Frank, for such a presentation, and thank you for giving us some insights into such an important topic. And also, I would love to add that we also, as students, see that as much as COVID-19 was destructive when it comes to supply chains, it also shed the light on what is supply chain and the importance of it. It also showed us, as professionals and students, which supply chains were actually resilient and it had proper contingency planning and who didn't. And we came to the grips and we understood that really the institutions nowadays are not really competing with their products anymore because you have more than one institution providing the same product. We are now competing with our supply chains and how innovative they are. That really what's going to differentiate our institutions. And that was very important to understand. So I also see that COVID really was destructive, but really very beneficial at the same time. And you can now understand that such catastrophes and turbulences, you can take it to your own advantage because other like institutions or companies may not be ready, but you can and take it for your own advantage. You can be pioneer in your own industry if you took that as a strategy.
Yeah, I believe that's right. I mean, you can see a disruption also as an opportunity, right? And you can create it as a competitive advantage because you
Exactly.
get a lot of learnings out of this, and you can build your capabilities out of this, right? Because there's now a burning platform. And what we also have seen is that now the disruptions as put supply chains really right up in terms of executive attention, which means maybe it was not there as much as it should have been in the last couple of years, but now it is there because now everyone, I believe, understands of the impact on supply chains in terms of the whole economy. If you think about that, it's been tied to supply chains and activities within of these supply chains. Our GDP, it's being completely linked to supply chains. I believe people in the last couple of years they have built a better understanding about supply chains and the impact of supply chains. And for me personally, I believe we are just in the beginning of something because I believe we also see that now more and more younger people are interested in the field of supply chain, right? Because maybe in the past it was, maybe not so cool to go into supply chains, right? Or into maybe logistics, but now it's very cool because I believe there will be huge demand in future also in terms of supply chain professionals. So if you look into the market even right now, it's a hot market for supply chain professionals out there. We don't have enough students to supply the market really with supply chain professionals, right? But that's going to change. I'm pretty convinced that organizations have learned that over the last couple of years also that how important it is and how good it is to invest in supply chains. And the ones, you said it, who invested in supply chains, in capabilities, and talents, and really, like what I said, perform and transform and ongoing also investing in an organization, they find themselves in a better place today, right? And others who haven't invested, they find themselves in a place they don't want to be.
That's right. So we're ready to receive all your questions. So if anyone is interested, We are ready.
There's one.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Anna.
Hello, Mr. Frank. How are you?
Good, good.
I want to ask how to build a supply chain resilient before the next disruptions, and from your opinion, what is kind of disruptions that can happen next?
Yeah, that's over putting crystal ball. We have a bit of an echo. Maybe can you put yourself on mute? Then now it's better. Um, it's almost like a crystal ball, but a couple of things we have to watch out. Geopolitically, I believe we have to keep an eye on certain things without going into details. But that's something we have to watch. The other one is cyber security. I believe it's something we have to watch also very carefully. We have to watch the dependency on and capacity available on certain raw, raw material. I give you an outlook. A lot of electronic components, when you think about the raw material side as being coming from raw earth materials. And these raw earth materials are samba. And from our point of view, we have to see things in correlation with each other, which means when we do certain things on the one side, maybe if our sourcing comes out of a certain area, we just enforce certain sanctions on certain parties, then we may have a shortage of supply because maybe now the supply side comes exactly out of that country. And my point is, I believe we have to look more on the supply side in future than on the demand side. Our constraint will be coming more on the supply side than on the demand side. Also, what to watch out for is the consequence of setting up local or regional supply chains, because we have been really in focus of setting global supply chains over the last 25 years, and now in focus is a lot of companies are talking about regionalizing or localizing their supply chains. But that comes also at a consequence. So that could be that we need to understand the consequence of doing or not doing certain things, and if that could end up in further disruptions. I know it's a long-winded answer, and you're probably not getting what you are looking for, but at least a couple of things I've mentioned. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Frank.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a quick question, Frank. First of all, thank you for accepting our invitation to join our students session today, and we are really glad about your contribution. And I thank you very much about this impressive presentation, which covered all the contemporary issues in the supply chain resilience and how professionals, whether young professionals or C-suite professionals, can consider such actions to be taken and such considerations in this disruptive global supply chain environment. So thank you again for your contribution today. My question is very simple regarding the Danfoss company as a supply chain services. Did the company affected by the earthquake or the natural catastrophic disaster that happened in Turkey and Syria and the last week, have you been affected by this natural disasters with your stakeholders or your partners in the region? And how, in case if yes, so how did you handle this kind of unexpected event?
No, thanks God not. Not to my knowledge that we really got impacted as such through that. But it can happen at any given point of time in other locations, as we all know. We got impacted a bit through the conflict in the Ukraine last year. And that is something, of course, we also needed to learn in a way of that we didn't really anticipate this. But this comes down then, what I said before, in a way of your ability to act fast and quick. And in a way, the first applications we have as a company and leader is looking after our people, that our people are safe, which means safety first, right? So we treating it from really a humanity point of view, that our people are safe, and what can we do for our people to support them wherever they impacted, right? And then we're looking at the business side of saying, are we impacted, our partners are impacted, and what does that mean in terms of our ability to supply to our customers, our global supply chains or regional or local supply chains being impacted, and what can we do about it? So almost like a SWOT team, which is quickly put together to look at the impact, right? And we have certain risk scenarios in our company where we have playbooks which come into place when these things are happening. But also on the other side, you can't have everything planned for. That's also something we have learned, I believe, over the last 2 or 3 years, that there's a lot of things we haven't had on our radar screen. Now they are, but there might be other things we don't have on our radar screen, which can come into play.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much. Right.
We can take the next question. Noor, go ahead and ask.
Hello, Mr. Frank. I want to ask, do the need to perform and transform supply chain is the same how to improve supply chain resilience, or there are ways to improve, or what are ways?
Sorry, can you repeat the last sentence again, because I couldn't hear that clearly?
Perform and transform supply chain is the same how to improve the supply chain resilience, or there are other ways to improve, or what are the other way?
Okay. Yeah, I believe you have to work on perform and transform at any given point of time. Of course, you need to link that to resilience. But also, when you think about performance, really your day-to-day operations, to really make sure that you are working on really delivering on your promise, but also being consistent with your operational performance, which means that's really keeping the lights on, running the operations, and performing. On the other side, you also have to keep an eye on the changes around you, which often being market-driven, customers needs-driven, maybe technology-driven, maybe disruptive from a disruptive nature. Which means you have to transform, and transform means, when you think about capabilities you have as an organization, and starting with your capabilities as competencies we have as people, which means if you also look at the last few years, where we have more and more of these type of emerging technologies coming into play, with artificial intelligence or machine learning or digital twins, you have to be able to actually support that as an organization, which means you have to have different skills and competencies in future than you maybe had in the past. So you have to invest in these capabilities and skills in order to use these technologies, because it's not just bringing these technologies in, you also have to be able to have the competencies in your people, in your workforce, to use these kind of technologies, right? The same applies with, if the market is changing, if the customers are changing, often you have to change your business model. And if you change your business model, you perhaps have to change your business processes as well. And that's also a capability you have to have as an organization to deploy that. If you implement or you want to use new technologies, then you also have to have a certain skill. And that's really transformational stuff you have to work on at the same time while you keep your operations running, and also keep an eye on that you have to perform, right? Because if you perform very well, then you generate enough investments, and the funding comes out of your operations day to day in order to fund your future transformations. Which means you have to work on both ends at the same time, and that's what I meant when I said being balanced about it. You cannot just only focus on today without of focusing on the future. That's a balancing act which you have to do as an organizations, and then you have to work through the cycles of the market, because as we all have experienced, markets are actually operating in a cycle. And a business cycle, as a rule of thumb, in the past it was around about 7, sometimes 8 years, which means between the market is at the peak, and then the reset is gonna happen, and it goes the whole cycle again. And then you have to also being able to do these things through these cycles, which means cycles are coming in there as well to look at. So you still have to perform through the cycle. You have to look at this when you're going through the cycle, how you can transform and maybe use certain opportunities you have in that cycle to build different capabilities in order to compete on a different level in future. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Frank. I was actually going to ask a question, but you answered it while you were speaking. So I think that with this we can finalize the seminar. It was very nice to finally meet you after all the emails. And we are looking forward for more collaborations, actually. So maybe during the summer, if we're going to host any camps, we would also like to have you be a part of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
More than happy to support it, and thanks for having me. Always good also to have a good discussion with the next generation of leaders taking on a big supply chain in future. So thanks for having me.
The pleasure is ours. Thank you so much.
Okay. Nice.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much for your time. And yes, indeed, as my colleague Yasmin just mentioned, we are inviting you, if you don't mind, to join our international logistics camp that will be host next summer in end of August, the beginning of September. Actually, we are doing it by 2 means, on campus and virtual. So it's up to you, but you can join whether on online or on campus personally. And we will discuss the supply chain resilience and all the global supply chain disruptions that happening around the globe. This is the main theme, and we will give you all the information in advance very soon. Thank you again for your impressive seminar, and looking forward to collaborate with you in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.